So, the state of disaster due to our energy crisis has ended today, and Treasury has withdrawn its exemption that allowed Eskom to avoid declaring irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure in all their financial statements. 2 U-turns in one day. Let's discuss this now with Wayne Duvenage, CEO of the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse. Of course, OUTA was in the process of mounting a legal challenge against the state of disaster. Wayne, thank you so much for joining us. So, do you think the government jumped, realising perhaps the state of disaster was really not having any material impact on trying to sort out the electricity problem, or was pushed, potentially by your legal action?
Yeah, hi, Sally. Yes, we were well down the road in the legal challenge against them. We'd launched it within a week or so of them declaring the state of disaster in February, early February. And they'd missed literally every deadline. Some of them were given as a court order for their replying papers. And it got to the stage where we were going to meet with the Deputy Judge President and them and their legal authorities later on this month, the middle of April. And I think they realized that they didn't have a case. They were going to lose the case. And rather than lose the case, make some, announcement that they've realized that things are actually in place and they shouldn't be litigating to stay on board with this decision. And that's the stuff that we told them. They've got all the mechanisms. They've got everything is already in place to deal with the electricity emergency. There was no need for a state of disaster. So I think they were pushed.
Mm-hmm. Government says the state of disaster allowed them to, and I'm quoting, enhance interventions by the National Energy Crisis Committee and to support the National Energy Plan. They say they put in place wide-ranging regulations that laid out the specific responsibilities of the different organs of state to help lessen the impact of load shedding. They don't mention any specifics in the press release today. Do you know of anything that was done that perhaps just helped focus everyone's mind on one issue under the state of disaster?
No, not at all. And they put out those regulations and none of them made sense. And quite frankly, when we looked at this decision and what they had been saying to the public just 3 days prior to coming out with a state of disaster, is that they didn't need a state of disaster. They had everything in place. So we don't believe that rationale or reasoning provided makes any sense. They know now, and they've stated that they have everything at their disposal to introduce emergency procurement and deal with the electricity crisis that we have without having to go into a state of disaster. This is a very different situation to a state of disaster under a pandemic that is rapidly spreading. This is a self-made disaster over decades, and there's no emergency in this situation. All that is required is good governance, good leadership, practical leadership, and get your house in order. And that was the real issue here. And I think they know that they were going to be on hiding to nothing in the court case.
Let's move on to the exemption now, because that's been huge news today. And that is the fact that Eskom was granted by Treasury this exemption from declaring fruitless, wasteful and irregular expenditure, which basically means that it would be in one part of the report and not in another part of the report. To speak for the exemption for a moment, my understanding is that it allowed a quicker snapshot of the current financial dealings, where some of that wasteful, fruitless expenditure might have happened in previous years, for example. The other issue around irregular expenditure is it doesn't mean it's corrupt. Sometimes you have to break the rules. Let's say, for example, you need an emergency part for a power plant. You can't go through the lengthy process to procure it the typical way. You have to phone someone and say, can you ship it over tomorrow? That breaks the rules, but it's for the right reason. Now that they've said, look, it's off the table for now and we need to do more consulting, do you think realistically there were any good motives behind this? I know that in South Africa we're allergic to any hint of corruption, and understandably so. But can you see any reason behind this potential exemption?
No, it's quite contradictory when they say, look, we want to put these exemptions in so that we can get the process happening faster and get good ratings, qualified audits or unqualified audits for the ratings agencies. But if their ratings agencies want to get this information, well, we put it in another report called the annual report or the integrated report. Now, that sends mixed messages. What we need is the statutory report, which is the financial statements, to have all the factual information. And that's where they wanted to remove it from. So you're painting the wrong picture about financial hygiene and good governance if you don't report on it there. And we don't buy their excuses. If you look at the letter and the reasons given by the chairperson of Eskom, it speaks to inadequate systems and internal controls. It speaks to information that is removed and not always corresponding with supporting documents. It speaks to literally bad governance, poor administration. So what the minister should have done is, because they do Eskom no favors, by the way, when they give these exemptions, certainly for 3 years, the minister should have said, sorry, Eskom, get your house in order. These are not insurmountable issues that you've got to deal with. You're a big organization. You have all the expertise. If you haven't, go and get it, but get your house in order. And if anything, I'll give you 6 months to maybe a year, but not 3 years. So this is just wrong. This is bad for this country. This is bad for investment confidence. This is bad for oversight, quite frankly.
The finance minister spoke to my colleague Rapiwa Madzena on the show just a little while ago, and he conceded that he only found out later that there was not enough consultation with the Auditor General, that they spoke to the SOEs, they spoke to external auditors, etc., but they didn't actually consult, as they should have, is my understanding anyway, with the AG. What do you make of that and the fact that he is acknowledging this now?
Well, it speaks to a government that is shooting from the hip, that is not giving enough thought to the consequences and the unintended outcomes of what happens with big decisions like this. I have a feeling that it was more than just the Auditor General, that there might have even been some of the financial institutions who currently have bonds with Eskom, who might have in their agreements in the fine print that says you can't withhold this type of information, and possibly even wanting to exert a recall on their bonds and their loans to Eskom. It's a number of things, and for the minister to acknowledge this after the fact, I mean, the Auditor General would have been the first person that I would have called, and it does indicate in a government that is shooting from the hip. The same thing with the state of disaster, the same thing with the ETOL decision and the R2 decision. I can go on and on, Sally. There are a lot of decisions that are made without the necessary consultation with civil society and with the various authorities. So I think we have a government who says that they're a government that consults and engages, but they actually don't. We see it time and time again, the amount of decisions that are made that don't make sense, and had they just consulted a little bit, they would have realized that there's a bad decision. So they need to do what the president speaks so much about is, we're a learning government, we do engage with civil society and so forth. I can tell you now, they're not learning from these mistakes, and they're going to continue to make them because they are too inwardly focused and too hubristic in their decisions, thinking that government knows everything and they don't need to consult. So I don't know if they're going to learn another lesson, because they haven't learned anything from prior mistakes of this nature.
Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. Out as CEO Wayne Duvenage.